Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's in-depth ag forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. First of all, I finally sound a lot better. I think I'm over the worst of what we've been dealing with COVID and on the mend here. So I appreciate all of the well wishes and the kind remarks from all of you. But I've been making a point in a case over my last several videos that as we approach the summer time period, there's some key things we need to be on the lookout for in the pattern. And what you've been looking at here is the geopotential height. So this would be the jet stream level flow, the trough and ridge pattern since the beginning of April. And what we've seen the jet stream continuing to favor are deeper troughs that keep coming out of this part of the Gulf of Alaska into the Pacific Northwest. Now, the case that I want to make is if this pattern maintains itself through May, this is not one where the Northwest breaks away warm and dry. This keeps the Canadian prairie on the wetter side of things. It keeps the northern plains on the weather side of things, which has been problematic as of late, especially given all the flooding in that area. And then as we move our way toward summer, troughs that tend to exist here in the Gulf of Alaska as we approach summer tend to increase the risk of ridging in the midsection of the United States. And summer tends to rob a bit of the momentum from the atmosphere and produce a major risk of drought, development, and redevelopment in the Midwest. And what would make that situation even all the more worse is if we started to see troughing happening here with large ridging over Greenland. So in other words, you get the pattern very bunched up in a big omega block downstream, and then upstream you tend to have this trough right in place. Now for the coasts, we tend to be cooler and wetter, but for the central United States, there tends to be a lot of ridging. Now, it's been a long time since we've seen a pattern really become fully established like that. And all that I'm asking right now is that you just watch the evolution of the pattern with me, because what this has got us into so far is seen in these next two maps. Again, I love showing these. They're just a great way to understand where we've been. It's the average temperature ranks by climate district from April 1st up until May 18th. We've split the country north-south on the heat. Of course, it was much different last year compared to this year. We've had a lot of extreme heat in Texas getting into the desert Southwest and Southern California. We've yet to be able to really break away from the record cold in the Pacific Northwest and bring in any sort of sustained heat to the northern plains. Because of this same pattern, again, the jet stream entering like this and ejecting most times toward the Great Lakes, this is what our precipitation pattern has looked like. So extremely wet in the northwest, very, very wet in the northern plains. And again, we've talked about this area in Montana that had been missed, although some moisture to that area today. But then we're going to be watching to see if the drought area, which had been beat back in the month of April, we want to know if that's going to start to increase in its area again. So those are all the main features that I'm watching very, very carefully with this pattern. Now, new drought monitor came out this morning, and this is what it looks like. Just to give you some stats, about 60% of the lower 48 is in some form of drought, the greatest of which is in the interior of Oregon, this part of Nevada and Southern California, and then down here in this part of Texas, Oklahoma, parts of Colorado, Kansas, and especially New Mexico, where we've been watching those fires. Elsewhere, the drought has really improved. It came down off of its peak, which was in late winter, at 75% of the land area. So we've certainly seen some improvement in places. But I just want to make a point here. Remember that when you think about those years that are extremely wet or extremely dry, remember that in the coming months, from May through June, July, August, we often saw multiple regimes or patterns setting up. So what I'm about to share with you, what I'm saying is at some point we need to be on the lookout for these things, but they won't be set in stone for the entire time period. What do we have in the near term is still dominated by the pattern we've been experiencing, and it looks something like this. 12Z European ensemble continues to keep near normal to wetter than normal conditions in the northern plains into the Great Lakes. And this is going to be an area here and also down here. We're going to see some extremely heavy rainfall in the coming 7 or 8 days. A lot of moisture coming up out of the, coming out of the Caribbean through the Gulf of Mexico, and it's going to be just feeding into a stalled out frontal boundary that's just going to very slowly move its way on which new low pressure systems could eventually form. But this is it. This is what the pattern looks like. Now, for those that are here in this part of the Western Corn Belt, there will be windows opening up to get some of this crop planted. I know we're very late here, but we're going to be getting this in, and we will start to see some warmth return to this area, but it's going to be a little while in the making. I want to show it to you another way. This is your next 10 days in terms of the probability of getting an inch of rain or more. And what I want to do is I want to step it up to now 2 inches, Okay, so you can see that in through this part here from Missouri through Illinois into Michigan, that region right in through there has a better than 70% chance. Same thing for parts of the Mid-South down to the Gulf Coast. And the likelihood of getting over 4 inches in the models, still that corridor is the corridor we're going to be watching very carefully. Now, what's going on to help kind of shape our ideas about what's moving forward? The MJO and the La Nina have kind of decoupled as of late. And what I'm seeing here is, as we talked about, that convectively coupled Kelvin wave moved very quickly over the last about 8 to 10 days. It's come right out of phase 2, went screaming into phase 6 and 7, and is currently sitting weakly into phase 8. And the models are expecting it to swing back around again. That's a lot of movement in a short amount of time in the MJO, which means, I don't know if this is the way to think about it, but see it as moving over the top of the circulation set up by La Nina. Now, speaking of that La Nina, this is the way the current ocean temperatures look. We still very much have what we call that negative PDO signal, which is the cold water here, and it has been getting colder as of late, just off of the Pacific Northwest. And then, unlike a year ago, that's teaming up very well with the continuation of this La Nina feature that you see here. Now, a couple of things I'm going to be watching for. Now, just understand, I'm in the Midwest, so that's just my backyard. I look out for this region a lot. If this water over here begins to warm, yet we maintain cool water in the Gulf of Alaska, off the Baja of California, and then it extends over the Aleutian Islands back toward Japan, that would be a signal that would really increase the summer drought risk in the whole of the central United States. Again, if this begins to warm while this stays cool, we keep this cool, and some cooling happens here. Those are some signals I'm watching out for. There's another part to this story in the Indian Ocean. If these waters tend to stay warmer and this stays cooler, we stay in that negative phase of the Indian Ocean dipole. And what that does is that drives a stronger circulation into India for the monsoon, but it tends to limit the strongest jet stream winds to be right in this area. If we then lose momentum in the jet stream come summer, the jet stream tends to go north and tends to be longer waves, and they tend to stay put and retrograde at times. Those are all the things I'm watching with respect to what's going on with ocean temperatures. But this is a much different scenario than we saw a year ago when La Nina faded very quickly. And that's why I'm thinking that the coasts likely not going to be seeing a major risk of drought development, okay? There's already drought in place in the west, but drought development getting worse. And I've got more risk in the central part of the United States. No, of course, I don't want any part of the U.S. or any growing area in the world to deal with that, but we're just looking at the pattern and trying to make an assessment, all right? From there, though, we do have brand new data out from the European weeklies, and this goes all the way out to the 4th of July. So I'm looking at the time period of June the 4th to July the 4th. And the models have stayed very consistent with this weather pattern in the Canadian Prairie Northern Plains, through the Great Lakes into New England, from parts of the Mid-South into New England again, and then in the Southeast. What's helping feed this is, it's off the image here, but a much stronger Bermuda high than normal at this time of year. So you're getting a lot of this motion coming from the flow. And given the position of the jet stream coming in like this, the risk of seeing drier conditions in this area continues. Now, as I said on Monday, this does not mean that we will not expect to see convection in here. It's just to get, late spring low pressure systems to form in this area would be, I think, challenging in this overall pattern. Now, take a close look at this, and then now let's compare it to some brand new data that was released today from the CPC. I want to show you their outlook for the month of June. That's what you're looking at here. And again, you notice the similarities where the greatest risk of being drier than average and hotter than average is almost in the same places that we've seen the European model put things. But let's take this and stretch it out to a 3-month view, and I'm going to look at this in 2 different ways. First, let's just take a look at what the CPC is saying, and then let's do some analysis on it. We're going to play a little game. What if it is right, especially, on the temperature pattern? This could mean an early setup of the jet stream ridge axis here. Now, if that occurs, the jet stream flow just in general would come in and go over the top of it like that. What that tends to do is produce high pressure here, and the flow around the high pressure, which we know in the northern hemisphere is clockwise. What ends up occurring with this pattern is we tend to get a lot of ridge riding thunderstorms here, and that's the thunderstorm symbol I'm trying to draw, but they tend to come in and hit this area. Whereas we tend to stay under the ridge, blocking Gulf of Mexico moisture, it tends to stay drier. Hence the reason why they have this whole region showing up with below average precipitation. In this situation, given that there's high pressure here, it will be very difficult to put other large high pressure cells somewhere in the US, which means the next one, the Bermuda high, will probably be over here by Bermuda. So I know I'm drawing it on this map, but just imagine. So that flow keeps coming around, and you end up getting a stationary boundary that sits here. And that's why they tend to keep this area with above average precip. Now, in addition to that, so the storms coming in from this direction, being fed on moisture from the southeast, this also could take any would-be tropical system, in this particular area, and send it underneath that ridge toward the east coast. So I can see that scenario setting up. What I'm questioning is whether or not that's where it is in June, and does it move west in July and August? If it does, that opens up a bigger section of the middle part of the United States to more storms. If it doesn't and it stays here, then there's a lot of reason to be concerned about drought risk in the midsection of the country. That's it. That's what we have to watch to see set up. Now, we don't know if it's going to be there just yet. I've made a case that based upon certain things like the ocean temperatures, that there is risk for that, but we don't yet know if that is certainly going to be the case. I told you I want to show you a second part of this, though. We're going to click up here and we're going to go look at their actual model output. This is the precipitation forecast, the newest one, for June, July, August. Now, their June, July, August precipitation anomalies for their latest run here are not as dry as the previous run. So they are more closer to normal. Still on the drier side of things, but more normal. What has not changed is this. The July, August, September, the NOAA's forecasting team and their models, I would imagine, are taking that ridge and either leaving it in place or possibly shifting it east. That's why we see the greatest risk of being drier than normal squarely in some of the most productive ground in North America. Now, I'm going to add to this the IRI multi-model forecasting group. And what you're looking at here is their summer precipitation forecast, June, July, August. These colors are below normal, these would be above. Notice the similarities for June, July, August, whereas wetter here, although they've got the mid-Atlantic showing up with the drier signal too. But as we then go from there into July, August, September, they're trying to also anchor some drier conditions, not only here in the western Corn Belt and upper Midwest, but also back in the Pacific Northwest. So we need to continue to weigh these things against some of the bigger picture ideas that we've been talking about. And a lot of that has to do right now with where there currently is drought and soil moisture deficit, and what the La Niña would say about the pattern. So that's the two new kind of latest updates I've got on the long range. Today, though, watching the satellite, take a look at this low that's up here running along the U.S.-Canada border. So that's returning some cloud cover and some precip to dry parts of Montana. But to the south of it, it was fascinating to watch. See this right here? These are the remnants of a system of storms that started in Colorado, went through western Kansas, came through Oklahoma, then eventually into southern Missouri, and today they've continued as a mesoscale convective system, and they're starting to show up right here in southern Illinois. Now, when they were going yesterday, I'm just going to show you my Twitter feed. Many people captured pictures of this because the storm's outflow produced a haboob. That is a dust storm driven by the outflow of a thunderstorm. A couple of incredible pictures of it. This one by Jim Tang is probably my favorite. Just wanted to show you those. But in addition to the storms here, we have storms that are firing on a boundary sitting there, coming up right here in this part of Texas, and where we were most concerned today about multiple rounds of storms here in northern Iowa, getting into Minnesota and Wisconsin. So with all of that, let's go look at the bigger picture. Over the next 7 days, we already know we're targeting this area for quite a bit of heavy precipitation. I'll talk to you about Colorado in just a few moments when we get into a temperature discussion. But take a look at this. This is what the flow looks like overall as we work our way toward the end of this week. That low, which is here today, curls up into the Hudson Bay and leaves this stalled out boundary right in through here. But the moisture feed began in Africa, came across the Lesser Antilles, through the Caribbean, up through the Gulf, and will eventually funnel around just like this. And this front I drew isn't going anywhere fast, which is why we expect to see multiple rounds of showers and storms on that boundary. By the way, partly due to what was going on with the MJO moving so quickly around the globe and just some suppressed convection here earlier in the month, it's giving us a big dust storm as well. So this is aerosol optical depth, and what you're getting here when you see these bright colors is Saharan dust coming all the way through the Caribbean, and by the weekend getting into the southeast. So, this is going to make the skies quite hazy, could really redden up the sunsets and sunrises, so watch out for that. There's some Saharan dust coming through there. Our all hazards weather map, though, let's get an update of this. There at 5:55 tells us what we're watching. Severe thunderstorm watches, tornado watches. We got our eyes on 2 places here for strong to severe storms right now. And all of this is red flag warning. And here is a heat warning. Now, in Colorado, winter storm warning, and they just issued this later on this afternoon. That is a frost advisory. I'll talk more about that in a few moments. We've been on the lookout for this for a while. But throughout California, red flag warning. We've got frost advisories here, and there's a freeze warning in the Snake River Valley. Very colorful map to be talking about. Let's go on the severe weather side of this first. Tonight, multiple rounds, 2 rounds coming through this area, and we've already seen the risk this afternoon and this evening here in parts of the Mid-South where the Mississippi and the Ohio River come together. Tomorrow, the front starts to slide through, so we're going to keep an eye here. This will be on Friday, and then on Saturday, it's a slow mover, so stronger storms could still sit on that line. I want to show it to you by going to the high-res NAM model, which is what you've got. Whoops, let's try that again. There we go. And you're going to see, this is 6 o'clock. There's the first round of storms here, the leftover MCV there, and the scattered convection. The model was well initialized. So in the overnight hours, you see the complex of storms moving in this area. In fact, watch this. These storms might move all the way out here and even curl back around off the screen into the Atlantic. But see the second round coming in the overnight here in the upper Midwest. As we play through tomorrow morning, tomorrow midday, tomorrow evening, that's where this front stalls out. Scattered storms in Florida. This, just so you know, these were the storms that last night were here. So they've been on a long journey to get over to New York. And then on Friday night, getting into Saturday, we're going to continue to watch that frontal boundary for strong to severe storms. And into Sunday, we're going to keep an eye on it as well. So this is Saturday night to Sunday, once again, building down that line. Okay, from there, I'm going to do the multi-model analysis. We're going to go through this relatively quickly. The most dominant feature will be this low curling up into the Hudson. It's in both models. And the front that it leaves just sitting here. Ready? So both models in lockstep with this. And yep, we've got snow coming in here Friday night to Saturday morning. I'll show you that map in a moment. And then what we see is that going into Sunday and eventually into Monday, while a big area of high pressure tries to clear things out, we just got this stalled out frontal boundary continuing to deliver precipitation. By next Tuesday, there's a shortwave that tries to emerge here in parts of the southern plains and mid-south, and that one's going to run right up on that same frontal boundary. Did you see it there in the European? The GFS is slower with the progression and therefore much wetter, but that's the mainstay of this pattern through the next 7 days. Now, I mentioned that snow. National Weather Service, this is what they've been looking at for their snowfall forecast for Boulder, Colorado, out of the Boulder, Colorado office. So very heavy snows in the mountains here, but coming out into the high plains of Colorado, we're going to be on the lookout here for some pretty heavy snow in those locations. Again, though, just look at this. In that snow, there is 1 to 2 inches of liquid. So we're going to put that down on some very dry locations. But this is an area where we're expecting the heaviest rains over the next week. What about week 2? Well, you know that I'm concerned about troughs in the Northwest. Starting on May 29th, we've got it there. Now you see the ridge out ahead of it, so warmth is going to come back in a big way. But those troughs in the west, and look, all the way out here to the beginning of June, again, another one reforms. That's what I'm worried about watching. So how does that give us a week 2 precipitation pattern? Drier here. Systems come in, run right where we talked about them. And then they come over here. So drier there, wetter all along the periphery. And that's the pattern that, if that continues through June into July and August, brings drought risk to the midsection of the United States. But before we get back into that discussion at another video, we got to talk about these temperatures. Major swings in temperatures coming. Here's Thursday's highs. We already saw these. Triple digits down here in Texas. Same thing tomorrow. Heat builds east. But look how much colder than normal it's going to be in the midsection of the country. This is almost 30 degrees, almost 40 degrees colder than normal in Colorado, and that's where the snow is going to be. So by Sunday into Monday, that cold starts to clear east into Tuesday and Wednesday, and we're watching for midweek next week for the potential for triple-digit heat in the Central Valley of California. Overnight lows, the nights I'm concerned about would be Saturday. This would be Saturday morning, That's our frost line. A lot of temperatures here in the 40s. And then on Sunday, very cold for this time of year in the midsection of the country, and that's where our frost risk is going to be. So it's everywhere in gray that you see here that we have a risk for frost on over the next 7 days. From there, let's just show you the temperature pattern, day 5 through 10. That's when the heat builds back in the west. But as you saw, troughs redevelop in the Pacific Northwest. So as we go forward toward day 10 through 15, which gets us all the way to the end of the month, in the beginning of June, we now get back into that pattern where the heat opens up here and the troughs come into the northwest, keeping it cool, which is just not the signal. We need heat units here, and we're not getting them. And that brings me to two last figures. One is from the CPC. They have the end of the month of May into the beginning of June with excessive heat risk here in the southwest and in the Central Valley of California. And this is the one I'm watching. If we start seeing a lot of heat pouring into this area in June, that's a signal for setting up the ridge here versus here. I know that might not seem like a lot of difference, but it is. And that's why my last figure here is from June 4th to July 4th. The models are favoring it here into the Great Basin and Desert Southwest. So now you know what I'm concerned about, what we'll be watching. Let's watch it together. I'll give you another report on Monday. Until then, have a good rest of your week and weekend, and we'll talk soon. Thank you.